Welcome to the National Council for Hypnotherapy podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of hypnosis, lifting the lid on hypnotherapy, sharing insights and tips for change as we chat. So sit back, relax, and enjoy all the wonderful possibilities of hypnotherapy. My name is Tracey Grist, and I will be your host today. So I'm here today with Ian Fielder, easy for me to say. So Ian, you've been in private practice and you're a hypnotherapy trainer, is that correct?
Yeah, I am a trainer for the HPT and the DIP-CAH, and I'm also a trainer for the supervisors course for NCH as well.
Brilliant. What do the acronyms mean, just so people know who are listening?
Well, of course, the HPD is the NCH diploma, so the practitioner's diploma, and the DIP-CAH is the advanced diploma, which is run by the UK Academy. So when I'm training, my students obtain two diplomas, the HPD from the NCH and the UK Academy Therapeutic Arts and Sciences Advanced Diploma.
Brilliant. And how long have you been in practice, been training? What led you to hypnotherapy? And thousands of other questions.
Well, I'll answer how did I come into hypnotherapy first, and then I'll answer your other questions. What brought me to hypnotherapy was, in fact, my wife. My wife and I had both decided that we would retire in our mid-50s, and as we were taking holidays and enjoying life in general, my wife started to develop a fear of heights. And at first it wasn't a problem, and then she developed a fear of maybe a bridge going over a stream, and if it didn't have a handrail or a balustrade, even if it was only 4 foot high, she had a real fear of crossing it. And it came to a head. We were in Rio in Brazil, and we decided to go up the Statue of Christ. And we got part way up, and literally she just grabbed a column, wouldn't let go, and was bawling her eyes out. And we realised then it'd become a serious problem.
Yeah.
So when we got home, a friend suggested, why don't you go and see a hypnotherapist? Never thought of it before. She went to see somebody fairly local to us, 3 sessions, and amazing results. So when I was coming up for my sort of retirement, because we achieved, both of us retiring, me in my mid-50s, my wife in her early 50s, I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I have a belief that most people, when they retire, they don't retire, they become consultants. So I thought, hey, yeah, I'll do some consultancy. And then I thought, actually, I wouldn't mind being a counsellor, on a voluntary basis. I think I've got the right skills. So there was a course locally being run at the local university on a weekend basis for counselling, run by the organisation Chrysalis. And I applied, got interviewed, got taken on the course. And the first year is primarily hypnotherapy. Year 2 and 3 are primarily counselling.
Yeah.
And my tutor took me aside one afternoon and said, fancy going for a drink? And I said, yes. And we went to the local pub, and she said, 23 people on this course. One of you is going to be a hypnotherapist. And I stupidly said, who? And she said, you. And I said, oh, I'm on the course to be, a counsellor. And she said, with your background, you've got all of the right skills and attributes, and you're a natural hypnotherapist. And I said, oh, okay. So I went home and said to my wife, you won't believe what my tutor said. She said, one person on the course is going to be a hypnotherapist. And my wife said, yeah, it'll be you. And I thought, this is bizarre. Very bizarre. So when I qualified, which was 2012, I went along to my wife's chiropractic practice and met with the owner and the manager and said, look, I'm qualifying to practice. I wonder if I could have a room. And within an hour, I left the clinic, keys to the clinic, a room and I could do voluntary work until I fully qualified. And I've been there ever since.
Incredible. It's amazing, isn't it? That slipstream of
Yeah. Yeah.
what's what were you doing before you became a hypnotherapist?
Very short story. My career was in estate management, facilities management. So 13 years in the house service, Portsmouth, Aylesbury, Milton Keynes, Kettering. Reached my level of incompetence in the house service. Joined IBM again in the estates department. The department did a management buyout, and I moved from my traditional role into business development and became business development director, which was bizarre because that wasn't my background. And in 2000, I became chairman of my professional institute. And in 2004, I was invited to become the chief executive. So from 2004 to 2011, I was the chief executive of a professional institute. And that's when I finished in 2011 with this idea that I would do consultancy, which I did for about 5 years, building up my hypnotherapy practice. And I also became a national leader of governance for the Department of Education. Because I'd been a governor since the 1980s in schools, I was drafted in to chair interim executive boards of schools that had gone into inadequate or special measures. And my job was to help the school get back into good or outstanding. So in 2011, 2012, I had a little portfolio of things to do. The national leader of governance, I finished a couple of years ago. I did about 3 or 4 years of consultancy, but my main passion was to build my clinical hypnotherapy business. And then around 2015, I was approached by the UK Academy of Therapeutic Arts and Sciences out of the blue to say, would you consider being a trainer? I'd never thought about it. I'd done a lot of training in my background. And so I said yes, went and did the course, qualified, and then started up my training business. So there you are.
They're not quite retired.
Absolutely not now. And as you're probably aware, I became a supervisor back in, I think, 2015, 16. So I supervise other therapists, not only hypnotherapists, but I supervise bereavement counsellors for a local charity. I am a member of Anxiety UK, so I offer my services to them. And I also answer the national help desk for Anxiety UK on a Wednesday morning every week. And I'm a governor of 2 schools. So, no, I haven't retired.
You really? Did you actually go on holiday ever?
Yeah, if you ask my students, the first question every Saturday is, when's your next holiday? So I'm there tomorrow. So I would say I went away for the weekend, last weekend for 3 days, and next Tuesday I'm off to Barcelona and off to the Monaco Grand Prix. So my wife and I do have regular holidays, but sharp holidays.
A good
Yeah,
life balance there.
absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
So what brings you joy of working with students, working with clients? Like how do you find where do you get your nourishment?
Oh, I always say if I break it down with clients, to be quite honestly, I would do it free of charge. I just absolutely love it. I have a strap line, changing lives, and that's what you see. If you connect, with your rapport and build trust, 95% of your clients, you help change their lives. As we know, every client has to be responsible for their own outcome. And as long as you can portray that, I'd love to say I've got the miracle cure and I've got the magic wand, but I just love working with clients and also training. I mean, I've trained probably to date over 40 people have gone into business, many of them around me. They've become my competitors. I am Very often I'm their supervisor. Um, and I love it when they put on their website they were trained by me, because a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I saw you trained, so I've come to you." But I just love working with people. I think my tutor said, because of my background, she said, you've worked in business, you've done problem solving, you've done people's appraisals, you've had people who've not wanted to perform in their role, some people who haven't been signed up to the mission and objectives of the organization, people bring you their personal problems. She said, you've had a life of working and understanding people. And in Belbin terms, those people who understand Belbin, I am an out and out shaper. So when I'm working with people, I can literally sit back and listen to them. But when I need to intervene, I can I can do an intervention. And I just love that. And with students, I mean, I tend to work with 4 to 6 students at a time. I like small groups. After COVID, it went up to 10,
Yeah.
because I think people were rethinking that, after COVID and career,
Yeah.
what have you. So 10 was a challenge, but every student at the end of the course says, "Yeah, I've learned so much, but I've learned so much about myself,"
Mm.
and that I don't think you can buy that. So yeah, I really enjoy it. I enjoy everything I do. And the great thing, and I suppose, the thing I told myself when I took early retirement, whatever I do, I can say no. So
Yeah.
when I was in the corporate world,
Yeah.
no was never an option. Now I can say no. So if I get that client, I say to my students, if you're going through your diary and there's a client you're dreading working with, that's a signal to you that it's not working. And now, I don't say I'm not going to work with you. I just say I'm not skilled. Can I refer you on to my supervisor, or refer you on to somebody else? Because your guts tell you this isn't working and I'm not the right person for them. But having that, I suppose, ability to recognize that and go, actually, I can say no, and I do it nicely and I do it professionally, and it's, on the occasional basis. But that's a big difference, I think, in working for yourself. You can always say no.
That freedom. And also, I think, this is going out to the public, and I think there's a lot of people who have been let down by their therapist or let down by their counsellor, who've stopped sessions without explaining why. And actually, I think sometimes it's really important to say, this isn't within my remit, and I don't feel it working in the way that's best for the client, and managing that as well, because then you leave that space for somebody that's the right fit for them. And I think that's
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. You can't leave them hanging. And it's also a recognition of reflection on yourself. You can't go into this world believing that you've got a cure-all
yeah,
for everyone, because none of us do. And I just say, if you're looking at that, I say to my students, when you're looking through your diary and then somebody rings you and says, "Well, can I cancel next Wednesday at 2 o'clock?" And you go, phew. That's a signal that maybe you've got to, as you say, gently close off, give them other options, help them move on. But you've got to be honest about your own skills as well.
and also your own like tiredness as well, if you're working too hard, or if that cancellation, you go, well, maybe we've not put in the relaxed stuff for ourselves, just with busyness too.
Yeah, yeah. And again, this is something that I work very hard with my students. You've got to recognize that work-life balance, but also you can't take your clients' problems out of the clinic room. I'm actually very good at shutting down. I'll tell you a little story that amused me. I was working with a lady, worked very successfully, I work upstairs and we go down to reception, book the next appointment, and take money if it's an occasion where they have to pay. Most of my clients pay in advance. And my clients carried on talking to me as we walked down the stairs into reception. And then she sat down very quietly and she said, "You're a different Ian downstairs than you are upstairs." And I looked at her and she laughed and she said, "I understand." And it was a recognition by her. I didn't realize I did it, but once I leave my clinic room, it's let's make the appointment. All you've paid. Look forward to seeing you. If you need anything, you know where I am. But I do change because you can't take it out with you. You can't carry on the conversation. You've got to bring it to a natural close. You've got to have boundaries, and I'm pretty good at that.
I remember when I was training originally to be a counsellor, and one of the struggles that I had was when you're walking to the room, because I'm so used to conversationally going, "How are you?" and wanting to know how somebody is, and how do you do that walk to the room without going, "How are you?"
That's a very good point because when I started, because I'm very lucky to have a receptionist most of the time because of the nature of the clinic, they said, "Oh, we'll come upstairs and knock the door and let you know your client's here." I said, "No, I'm a meter and greeter." So I come downstairs and I meet them. Yeah. And you're right. Then luckily, because I have to go upstairs, it's only a short flight of stairs, but you've got to avoid that, we're not in the clinic room. Yeah. And I also, this may be interesting from a public point of view, is that I only shake hands if the client offers their hand. I do not offer my hand. I'm very strict on no touch. Now, if the client, or, if it's a new client and they offer me their hand, of course I will shake their hand. But they very quickly know there is no touch. So I don't encourage, and that's why I like to meet and greet, because I'm down, there's other people there waiting for the other practitioners, and it's a nice safe space to say, "Oh, hi." Either it's an existing client so they know you, or if it's a new client, you can say, "Oh, hi, are you Tracey? Would you like to follow me upstairs?" And because I go first, it's not a convenient conversation behind you.
It's funny, isn't it? It's all those, and I think that's, to me, the mark of good practitioner is that people feel at ease and people feel comfortable. But we're also, because when somebody comes into the therapy room, we're doing the work, aren't we? And yet ideally we want it to feel comfortable and conversational and easy, like a chat. But yet we're not doing all of the social expectations around it. And I think that can be really confusing when it feels very conversational in a space, but then we're not continuing the conversation out of the door because of confidentiality, or, starting the work at the door, or all of those things that just...
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we generally will take our pace from the client. So if the pace is natural and you maybe have had a conversation or an email or some introductory, I invariably will say, "Oh, just remind me of what help you need." You do get the occasional client who takes all the space, and you've just got to politely intervene and say, "Well, we've got an hour and I want to use this hour wisely." And I would normally say, "Let me just tell you how this session is going to work." So just gently taking control, but say taking the pace from the client. So sometimes it is good just to build that little bit of rapport, talk about the weather, how did they find us, did they park their car okay, and what have you. And then you can gradually then take control of the situation. And I have a pretty set format of my first consultation session. So I always outline it with, the confidentiality, what's going to happen, what's not going to happen, when I'm going to take notes, because I don't take notes to begin with. I actually fully concentrate on the client because I want to understand fully why they've come to see me, some of the background. most clients are really good at giving you some information, but some are not. Some you have to, use your, 5 W's in your H, your what, why, where, when, and how. But you take your place from the client. They're there because they want your service. You're not there to impose, your practice on them.
Yeah, and I think it's very true that some clients are conversational and they like talking and that it feels comfortable, but some people just haven't talked about their problems before, and holding that space just so people know that they can come, and some might just want to talk or
Yeah, absolutely. And again, students with me, that's very often the question is like, when do you put them on the chair or the couch or whatever they're using? And I go, sometimes you don't. You can have a whole session just talking because you're right. It may be the first time they spoke to somebody who's not judged them, who's not said, if I was you, you're just listening. And, that hour of that talking can be incredibly therapeutic. And I wish I had £1 for every time I saw somebody for the second time and they walk in and they put their hands, on their hips and go, don't know what you did to me last week. And you think, all we did was have a chat. But it is a therapeutic process. And that's why I love doing what I do, because no two clients are ever the same. And even if a client presents with the same issue, you have this huge toolbox that you use with your client. You're working with them because you're working with what they bring to you, not, I do A and B and that leads to C. And I think that's why some therapists find it very difficult, because that's the way they've learned. And I think the way we learn is, tell me how I can help you, and then you go into your toolbox to
I mean,
start applying the right process. Yeah.
yeah, and it is the right process for the right person. We all need different things because of the difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's your favorite sort of hypnotherapy technique, or what do you like about like what do you think? Ooh, I like this.
To be honest, I don't have a favourite.
Ah,
I literally don't. In fact, when I go to conferences or when I discuss with other people, I find it quite hard to understand somebody saying, "Well, I do transactional analysis, or I do this, or I do that, or I only do this technique." As I was saying earlier, I just have a really big a toolbox, and I literally take it from my client. So yes, I've got lots of techniques that I will use,
yeah,
but I don't have, honestly, I don't have a favorite. I don't have a go-to. Yeah,
yeah,
I suppose we don't want to get, too technical on this discussion, but I will use, I'm CBT qualified, I'm NLP qualified, I might use Gestalt, I might use, sort of hypnoanalysis. You know, I will just do what I feel is right for that client. I'm looking for outputs. I'm not that interested in inputs. It's
yeah,
an output I'm looking for. So, and I have a lot of people come to me for supervision, and I quickly realise why perhaps they're not being as successful as they could be, because what they say is, "Oh, well, I do this every time, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't." And very gently, I sort of suggest, well, when you were training, what other techniques did you apply? And you see them struggling because you say, well, actually, there are many techniques that are available to us, many modalities that we use, and that one you used may have been appropriate with your last client, but actually with this client you're talking about, maybe it's not appropriate. So yeah, I'm not a lover of I use this and I use this and I use this, because I don't. And of course, again, when you're training, people are saying, what scripts do you use?
yeah,
And I don't. I literally listen to my client. With my students, I give them boilerplates, and I say these are very good boilerplates for anxiety or this type of problem. But I really just listen to the client, and then I wind in the appropriate therapy within a session. And I suppose that comes with experience, I suppose.
Yeah, I do think that it's that in counselling, I think that one would say it was integrative, wouldn't it? Counselling, which encompasses all the different fields for counselling rather than individual pockets. And I think
Yeah.
I would also label myself as an integrative hypnotherapist, that I would pick and choose in accordance with my clients. And it's not to negate people who read scripts, and I think it's again comes down to whether you get on with the hypnotherapist, what that rapport looks like, and what the fit feels like.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm not against people using scripts at all, but for me, I would change your terminology and say I'm intuitive,
Yeah,
and so therefore I'm intuitive. I participated in a study a few years ago with a London university on intuition. It was really interesting because they had worked with a number of different therapies, but not hypnotherapy. And they were saying, you know, you know, do you have intuition? And I say, yes, it just comes naturally. And you know, I have a belief that sometimes when we're working, we're engaging the five of our own modalities. And so when we're working with our five senses, just maybe that creates a sixth sense. And I have been talking to a client and I've said, oh, your husband, Bill, and they've gone, but I haven't told you my husband's name. Now, I'm not psychic in any shape or form, but sometimes you're working with a client and just something comes to you. And that's why I say sometimes I'm just intuitive with a client, and I might have planned a certain therapy script in my mind, and then as soon as I start engaging with a client and I hear the feedback from our previous session, I think, right, this is I'm going to take it in this direction now.
do you know, and it's because I'm a little bit, I love the word intuitive and intuition, but it does come with that, one presumes psychic and and for me, I like to think of it as enhanced rapport.
Mm.
Like when you're in the slipstream with your client and that connection is there, and I don't visualize, and I know that but I can dream. And so I visualize in my dream and I visualize when I'm going to sleep and when I'm waking up. So hypnagogic and pompic. And what I've also observed is when I'm doing a hypnosis with my client, I can almost visualize it. But I too have had the same where I've mentioned a name and they've gone, yes, that's correct. And you think, I've no idea how. And I think it's that harmony that you have with somebody. And it's just, I think
Yeah.
it's my, yeah.
And the conclusion from Imperial College, who did the study, was the two things. It was rapport and trust. If you build rapport and trust with a client, that, intuitive feeling, whatever we want to call it. And of course, just observing about, you're not visual because your eyes go top right, which if you were my client, the first thing I would say is you're not visual, because your eyes would go top left. And that's the thing I like with clients. I go and meet them in my waiting room, and then I have a question which I ask them to see which way their eyes go when they go into their memory, and I say, I think you're a very visual person. They go, oh yeah, how did you know? And I say, well, just the way your eyes go. And I said, I bet if you've got a cleaner at home, I bet you clean up before. And they go, how did you know? And it is that sort of rapport, that
Yeah.
trust you can build on them, but also using as we know. And people are surprised when you tell them that, we learn through observation, 55%, 38% listening to tone, and only 7% listening to the voice and words, because we can't learn in any other way. So when we're working with our clients, of course, we are observing them and picking up these things. And I think we do pick up, I think we do pick up on things.
I was talking to a friend the other day who we were talking, and we normally talk about what t-shirts we'd wear, talking about their wedding music and the choices that they've made. And that led us into another conversation about whether people actually listen to lyrics of songs. And we wanted to get a t-shirt saying, I listen to the lyrics, because people, and it just proves that, like, the music, the rhythm, the tone, but do we listen to the lyrics? I don't know. I like listening to lyrics.
Well, yeah, and I use music quite a bit. For example, when I talk about, I very often talk to clients about who gives you gold, who takes your gold, and explain, what happens when your batteries go dry and what have you. And then I say, just listen to Spandau Ballet, listen to the words gold, because that's not about money. That's about people taking their emotions, and they go, oh, I've danced around my handbag, or, I recognise that. And there's a brilliant song, I expect you've heard it, called Sunscreen. If you haven't heard it, look it up on YouTube.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the words. It was MIT graduation, and they invited a past graduate who was in her 80s. And the words to Sunscreen is the words she told the students on her graduation. And, if you just say to a client, I just want you to listen to it, they come back and go, wow, that's my life. Yeah. So you're right. Sometimes you've got to sit down and listen.
Yeah, and really focus. If somebody is listening to us who feels,
Let's hope they are.
one person who feels a little bit anxious or a little bit nervous or a bit phobic, maybe, what can you give some top tips to people, or don't feel good about themselves? Like,
Yeah, but very often, what I always do with somebody who says, I'm suffering from anxiety, the first thing I do is say, after I've done the sort of initial talk about what it is, what it isn't, confidentiality and whatever, I said, right, I'm going to talk to you about anxiety. I'm going to talk to you about what it is and what perhaps you're suffering from. And the way I very often describe it, I'll say, well, there's a lamp on my desk, and I'm sitting here on my own, and that lamp catches fire. So when that lamp catches fire, my subconscious now takes control. I don't take a conscious action, I take an unconscious action. I tense, I produce cortisol and adrenaline immediately. The adrenaline triggers the fight and flight process, and that helps me fight physically or mentally against the fire. My subconscious works on learned behaviour with the fight and flight. I expect I'd run away. And everybody goes, yeah, I understand that. I know all about fight and flight. And I go, right, okay, I'm going to talk about fight, flight, freeze, fawn and flop. And the majority of people go, what? And I go, let me just explain what all five are those subconscious reactions. So I'm going to change the scenario now. And I'm sitting here waiting for my next client. And I keep going, what if that light catches on fire? And if I keep doing that, I will tense, I will produce the adrenaline and the cortisol. It will never, ever trigger the fight and flight response. So what happens to that adrenaline? And then I go through the symptoms of anxiety, the shaking limbs, very often the shaking of the leg and up and down, the horrible feeling in the tummy, the tightness in the chest, the shortness of breath, the panic attack and what have you. And they go, yeah, that's me. I've got all of those symptoms. And I go, right, let's go back. So the fear of fear is anxiety. It can be generated quite easily by the what if or bringing the future into the present. And that starts a conversation with the client, because more often than not, and they would go, yes, this has happened in my life. and I keep going, what if? And I go, right, now we have a fundamental understanding. And then I go on to explain the structure of the brain in a very, very simple way of the conscious, the subconscious, a little about the cortex. And then I go, right, now I'm going to give you some help as we're talking here. And what I might do is give them a breathing exercise, or I might give them a control exercise. I quite like 5 to 1, let's work through our senses. And then I will very often introduce a quote. And I love quotes. And with my students, I'm the professor of quotes. And I very often say, right, we're talking about your anxiety. So I'm going to give you a quote by a lovely lady called Eleanor Roosevelt, my favourite lady. And she said very famously, the past is history, the future is a mystery, the present is our gift, and we should treat it as such. Past is set in concrete. You've been telling me, you've been going over a situation, you keep going over, if I'd done this, if this had happened, what have you. It's the past. The future is a complete mystery. You and I don't know what we're going to be doing tomorrow. You can plan and you can schedule, but we live in the present. So if we live in the present, doing the what if is going to cause us a problem. So it's, what I say is, let's think about what now. So I might talk about, some people enjoy, yoga. Some people, might do mindfulness. If they are unaware of the benefits of those, I might talk to them if it's appropriate. But really now they're telling me about the cause of their anxiety, but I brought it back to a very basic understanding. I might talk about the cortex where we do our recall. I might talk about our memory. We remember everything, but our memory is like a library. The older we get, the bigger the library gets. We may even lock things away in the back of our library. And I will expand depending on what the client is presenting to me, and then we will start on a discovery of the cause. Because what I say to them is, when you go to a doctor, most doctors are only interested in your presenting issue. What we're going to do is understand your presenting issue, and then we're going to understand the cause. Because if we can address the cause, then we can deal with your presenting issue. And I suspect, like you, I have many clients who come and say, I don't want to take a pharmaceutical. And I go, well, if your doctor's recommended it, you should be taking it. But if you don't want to go to your doctor, or there's a reason why you don't want to take it, let's work on things and see if we can make an improvement. But if your doctor's recommended it, that's what they do, and you should be taking it. I'm not medically qualified, but there are many things we can do, that I can give you support. I can give you anchors. I can do lots of things. And then I explain to them that dreaming, you were talking about dreaming and visualizing, because we all dream in our subconscious and we dream in the present. We can't dream in the past, we can't dream in the future. And that's why our dreams are crazy and mixed up. And people go, my dreams are really crazy. And I say, it's the transfer of your short-term memory into your long-term memory. And if you're anxious during the day, guess what you're doing when you're dreaming? You're transferring anxiety back into your memory. And that's why you're waking up first thing in the morning and you're going into your anxiety mode. So, depending on what the client is as you say, they may be coming with a phobia. The first thing I do is talk about the difference between, is it a fear or is it a phobia? How many people go, I've got a phobia of flying? And I go, okay, so we talk about it, and I say, so what is your phobia? Rarely it's about dying. More often than not, as we know, it's about control. It's not having control. So I'm saying, well, maybe it's not a phobia, maybe it's a fear. Maybe your fear is that you're not in control. There's some people behind those locked doors that are giving you the EBGBs because when you get in the car with your partner, you always drive. Because when you're in the passenger seat, you're putting your foot on the pedals and they go, oh yeah, that's me. So it's just having that conversation. Yeah, there are lots of things that we can help. And I talk about the conscious chair and the subconscious chair. So the conscious chair is when we're just chatting and I go, okay, I can give you a coping strategy for that. Maybe it's as simple as an elastic band on your wrist and we just flick it when you need an anchor. But what I do is I reinforce that, in the therapy chair, if you like. So that's why it's so enjoyable, because you're just working with clients, and some clients say really get it straight away, and they go, yeah, I'm always thinking about the future. I'm worried about that interview. What if I don't get it? What if I, make a mess of it? What if I'm late? And I go, that's all what ifs, isn't it? Yeah. Let's think about what now. One of the
Yeah.
things I often do is, when you go to a restaurant, when you pick something off the menu, what do you do? And they go, well, I look down and I think, oh, I'll have the roast beef. Okay. So when the waiter comes along, or the waitress comes along, what do you do? They said, well, I'll have the roast beef. I said, you don't go, well, I'm not going to have the chicken. I'm not going to have the curry. I'm not going to have the lamb. I said, you have made a decision. You've gone straight to the what now. Your
Yeah.
waiter or waitress is not interested in the what if, what if I have that, or what if I have that? And they go, oh yeah, no, I don't do that. And I said, right, okay, we've now got a bit of a structure to work on. Yeah, let's work on the what now, not the what if.
I love it. I love it. So if somebody was scared of lack of control,
Yeah,
how would you work with that? And not that
okay.
rolling,
Yeah,
all right?
yeah. So for example, we'll take fear of flying
Yeah.
as an example. Okay. So I will work on a number of sessions. So typically, my second session may be, depending on their sense of modality, and they're fairly visual. I will imagine them sitting around a lake,
Yeah.
and they see a mother duck, and they're just enjoying the scene, watching the mother duck swim around, and then there are ducklings, and you start counting the ducklings. And the mother duck has complete control. She lets the ducklings wander off, because you just give one quack and she brings them all back together. Time speeds up, and then they're all growing into adults. But at a time of the year, she'll start flying around the lake, and then you can watch them form a V in flight, and they fly off to the west. Time moves through the seasons, and then we come back to spring, and then you're looking in the sky, you're looking for that dot in the sky, you see it, it becomes a small V, it becomes a larger V. The mother duck brings her fledglings back into the lake, but of course they're no longer fledglings. And what she does, as soon as they've landed and she's checked them all there, she drives them away, because we are one of the few species that don't drive our young away. Yeah, that's
Tempting as it
why
is.
that's why our teenagers develop high dosage of
Uh,
dopamine, so they take a risk and leave, we hope. And then that would be my second session with them. I
yeah.
wouldn't explain what that was all about. And the
Yeah.
third session, I would take them through a flight. You arrange everything at home. You've got everything with you. You go through safely through security. You make sure you buy a book or a magazine. You're called onto the flight. When you get on the flight, the first thing you do is look at the safety card, because that's what you always do. And then you start looking around, and you look at the older couple sitting almost opposite you, and you think, oh, I bet they go to this destination every year. They look so comfortable. And then you look at the family who've got the young child, and the mother's got all the gubbins around her because she's got to look after the child. And then you look at the young couple, and she's really excited, and he's trying to be cool. And then you make sure your family are there. And then I describe the takeoff. I'm very lucky around here. We've got a concrete motorway, and it's a nightmare. So you can say, right, you're driving along the concrete motorway, but actually it only lasts 21, 22 seconds. And then you go up, you hear the clunk of the undercarriage. And what I say is, before takeoff, you hear two rings. And those two rings are the pilot saying, I've got my slot to take off. So you know exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
The crew sit down. When the plane is being reversed off, that's when you get your safety talk. And then I bring in the only really important sentence in the safety talk, comes after, if the pressure drops in this cabin, oxygen mask dropped from the compartment above. Everything else you hear is rubbish. It's for their protection, it's not for ours. Because not many people survive by putting a life jacket on if a plane crashes. But the next sentence after the oxygen mask comes down is, you must put your oxygen mask on first. You must look after number one. If you look after number one, you can look after everyone else. And then I go into observing. Then I get them to think about the pilots, the co-pilot. And I say, are the co-pilots really looking forward to the return flight because she's going back to her boyfriend tonight? Are the captain staying, over, and he's going to his villa? The rest of the flight is boring. You've got your books, you've got your magazines, you have a little bit of a doze. And then after all the cabin service, you hear the 2 rings, and that's the pilot saying 10 minutes to landing. You land, you get off, and now you're really looking forward to your break, your holiday, your business trip, and you're already looking forward to your flight going home. And that's the third session. And when I bring them out of my work, I go, so at which part were you scared? And they go, I wasn't. I said, exactly. Exactly. You are in complete control, because everything I'm telling them is about them being in control. So even when they're coming into land, I look at the old couple, they were asleep, because they've done this. Look at the young couple, they're really excited now. He's not so cool now, he's looking, he's telling her to make sure she's got her iPad and, what have you. The family, the baby dozed all of the way, she's gathering everything up. It gives them control. But you can also talk about the pilots. They're just normal people. They're looking forward to what they're doing afterwards. So I will very much do that type of session. And then I will finish with the serenity quote that, there are things in life that we can control. There are things that in our life we can't control. Serenity is knowing the difference between the two. And my example is the weather. I said, we can't control the weather, but you can wear clothes accordingly. You can take an umbrella. You can take wetproof clothes. You are in complete control, but you can never control the weather. So think about that. And it's because people, again, I'm going to use Balbin, they are completer finishes invariably. Very often you're going back to rapport and trust. Somebody's saying, oh, I've got a real phobia about flying. And I go, okay, I'm going to ask you what your job is, but you're not an accountant, are you? And they go, yeah, how did you know? And I think, yeah, I knew as soon as you walked in. Because people who like to be in control go into certain jobs. Yeah. They will be a quantity, not always, but they might be a quantity surveyor, or they do payroll, or they're in a job where they are in control. And you can build on that. So you can say there are lots of things in your control. Packing your cases, getting your paperwork, going through the process, you're in control of that. But the one thing you're not in control of is those people out at the front. But you've got lots of other things you're in control of on the plane.
Yeah.
So that would be something typical I might do.
Brilliant. And you mentioned earlier about the Fs. So I think we all know fight,
freeze. Yeah. Fawn and flop.
Yeah.
So fawn I describe as Stockholm syndrome.
Oh.
So, and in fact, I did this yesterday with a client. I did a 6 o'clock, a new client, and he asked exactly the same question. He said, fawn and flop. And I said, well, fawn is Stockholm syndrome. Now, he was a mature man, and I said, you probably haven't seen this, but if you go out into the high street on a Saturday night at 12 o'clock, you'll see 2 guys facing up to each other. And yeah, you do this, I'll do that, I'll hit you. 10 minutes later, I can guarantee they're walking down the road arm in arm. That's fawn. It's making friends with the things that frighten you. Now, that's not appropriate in every situation. That's all behaviour. But there are certain situations like Stockholm syndrome. The woman who's kidnapped, the way she survived was making a friendship with the person who kidnapped her. So fawning is actually using a subconscious skill to connect with the threat or the danger. Now, with my lamp catching on fire, that's not appropriate.
My lamb.
That's not going to happen. And flop is an extension of freeze. Freeze, we just freeze, and often happens with children. And it is said that freeze is a good defense mechanism. The last 100,000 years, the majority of threats would have come from predators that were night hunters. So freezing is a good way, and children very often can leak, something from every orifice. And if you smell like off meat, that's really good protection. So we should never shout at a child who freezes and messes themselves, because it's a subconscious reaction. They're not doing it on purpose. But flop is you go into a dead mode. You actually are dead. You are clearly are still breathing, you're still alive, but to the observer, you have died. So the flop is you in freeze, you would just stand and freeze.
Yeah.
But with flop, you just drop to the ground, and obviously it's not a nice subject, but somebody being raped, sometimes that could be a subconscious action. And that would deter the predator from further sexual. Now, people aren't doing it consciously, so you've got those 5 Fs, as you say, and very often it's very good to describe them, maybe not such in graphic detail, but explain the differences between them, and say our subconscious almost becomes 4 times more powerful than our conscious mind, and our fight and flight works with learned behavior. So children who haven't got learned behaviour, that's maybe why they freeze. But when we get older, the learned behaviour reacts right away with fight and flight, and that's why we get the subconscious action. Like the fire, I will run away. Yeah. Now I might think that's a conscious action, but it's a subconscious action. It keeps me safe.
And I think people have a lot of guilt around that response, don't they? If it's not
Yeah.
and it's coming to terms with that there's nothing we can do, that those are responses that come from deep within us.
Yeah.
I like things like, I don't know, there's the other defense mechanisms, like laughing when something is really serious, or falling asleep when the information is just too much. We feel drowsy, which is similar.
Absolutely. Yeah. Funeral syndrome, laughing at a funeral. Yeah. And gosh, I've had many of those over the years. People coming in and inappropriate laughter.
Because it's not, and we don't want to be laughing, but we invariably do. Although I've got girlfriends that we met at college way back when we were about 17, and we're now in our 50s, and of course, because we're older, we collect at funerals, and we went to a funeral together, all of us, and of course, because we all love each other and we've known each other, we just laughed quite a lot, and had to, hold it in, and then as we were walking out, the pallbearers were standing in a row with their hats, and the vicar had said, please put the donations in a bowl on your way out. And my friend Sam, you know who you are, Sam, my friend Sam either in the pallbearer's hat, and we'd be like shushing ourselves the whole funeral, and then on the way out, and because it was so distressing, and it's all of those sort of reactions that we have, that we think, oh no, have I done that?
And you trigger each other, don't you? Once one starts, yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you a funny story. This is a client said to me fairly recently. And she said, when I was sort of in my late teens, we always go to family funerals, and I had an aunt who would sit behind me, and she would prod me in the back and go, "You're next." And she said, I hated it when she did it, And she said, we've now grown up, and she said, we went to a family funeral, and I was sitting behind my aunt, and I prodded her in the back and said, "You're next."
I'm still going to use that at the next
And that was a client, and we were talking about, sort of laughing at funerals because she had a certain sense of humour. But yeah, it did make me laugh. Yeah.
I love it. So, so if you, I don't know, what has inspired you in terms of people, practitioners? You mentioned Eleanor Roosevelt. What
Yeah.
would be a favourite quote or a favourite?
I've certainly given you my favourite quote. There's lots and lots of favourite quotes from Eleanor Roosevelt, and there's some quite rude ones as well, which I quite like.
Yeah,
So I'm happy to share one. She was awarded by having a rose named after her,
yeah.
and she was quite flattered with that. But many years later, she was at a charity do, and they were selling old books, and there was a flower book on roses being sold, where she was. And she said, I was really tempted to open the book and see if Eleanor Rose was in there. And she opened it up and she burst out laughing. And the guy selling the book said, "What's so funny?" She said, "Well, there's a book in here called Eleanor Rose." He obviously didn't know who she was. And it says, "No good in bed, but best up against the wall." And she thought that was really funny.
Love it.
And she's got other ones which I use all of the time. One is about you never find out. A woman is like a tea bag. Have you heard that? You don't know how tough she is until you put her in hot water. And that's a lovely one as well. And I use that. And there's one which I have evolved slightly, and it says that intelligent people talk about ideas. You know, thoroughly clever people talk about things, less clever people talk about people.
No.
And that's a lovely quote which I use with my clients, because very often it may be a teacher and I won't go in the staff room because they're always gossiping. And when you say something like that, they go, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah." So that works very well. Person who most inspired me in life?
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad.
Oh, how lovely. Oh, why?
My dad was a typical mild-mannered man. He he had very Victorian values, which obviously came from his parents. So he had a real idea of what was right and wrong. I never saw him lose his temper ever in his life. I saw him deal with things like family deaths and what have you. And that sort of, in a way, I can't say I model myself on him because that's not true. For example, he went into an apprenticeship and he got to a position, he always stayed in that position and he would never take promotion because he had a loyalty to his workmates. And his belief was if I take a promotion, I will have to change, and I'm not a person to change. And almost in a way that inspired me in my career. I did a lot of work with government committees when I was a chief executive. I was chairman of something called the Asset Skills Council. So I got sort of involved with sort of various committees. And under Tony Blair, he set up a group to look at social mobility. So I was born and grew up in social housing, and I never went to university. I left school and went straight into work at 16. But I picked up his work ethic, but I realised I couldn't just stay as I was. I would have to look at my career. I never had a career path, but I was always aware of my skills and my opportunity, and that came from my dad. So I reversed his "I'm going to stay where I am" because I realised if you do go up the promotional ladder or you go up the manager chain or whatever you're going to do, you have to change. You can't be that person that used to be. You're acquiring skills, you're acquiring talents. As I say, from a a position of looking at Balbin and his identification of people, I realised I was a shaper. I could shape things. I could get things done. I could manage people. I could work with people. And so when I think back, yeah, my dad was my inspiration.
That's lovely. That's lovely. And also, I think it's one of those societal things as well, isn't it? But like contentment versus consumerism. Like friends have asked why I don't expand what I'm doing. I work one to one, and I'm with the NCH, but I love working one to one. I love it.
Absolutely.
Why
I'm
would
exactly the same. Yeah,
yeah, why
exactly the
would
same.
I train
Yeah,
or increase my practice when I'm doing what I love?
yeah.
But in the sort of consumerist scale, there's a different kind of expectation on us, isn't it? And I see it in clients who are doing what they love and feel that they should go up the ladder because but they're happy. They're
Yeah.
happy being. And I think contentment is so important.
I'd put it another way. I've just written an article that's going to be published called "Why Does a Tomato Teach You About Wisdom?"
Oh, interesting.
And I have a view. So, is a tomato a fruit or a vegetable?
I know it's a fruit.
You know it's a fruit, but
Yeah.
originally you know it's a fruit because your mum told you, or you learnt it. Okay.
Well, weirdly, because we had wallpaper on our bathroom toilet, was all about tomatoes.
That's right.
Who knew? Who knew? Sorry, carry on.
That's pretty weird, I must admit.
Yeah, it's random. It's a bit random.
But when we're growing up, we acquire lots and lots of knowledge.
Yeah.
And we know with teenagers, one of the big mistake of our clients is trying to transfer wisdom onto our children. Like, you're only 14, you've got to be in by 10. Oh, but mum, all my friends don't have to be in by midnight. We know it's rubbish, but they have learned that from their friends. The trouble is, as parents have experience. Yeah. And it's only when you've got experience and match it to knowledge, you have wisdom. And that's exactly, reflecting back what you just said, many of my students who've qualified and gone into business saying, oh, it's quite difficult to build up my business. Can't I work for you? And I go, no, no. I am a sole trader. I'm a limited company, but I'm a sole trader. You know, I love it when we get those calls from saying, you're not on the top of Google. And I go, yeah, I know. Yeah, but if you paid me lots of money, I could get you to the top of Google. And I said, I don't want to be on top of Google. Well, you must be mad. I said, no, because I have enough clients. I can't take on any more clients. I have a lovely business and I can manage my business. If you tell me you can bring me another 10 clients a week, I will fail. So I am happy not to be top of Google. I'm not going to pay anybody. And 95% of my clients come from recommendations. So why do I need Google? Yeah, I'm on there, but I'm probably on page 53. That's fine. People come to me through recommendations, and then somebody else says, "Oh, I've had a look at your website, and I could do so much better." I have a contention that people only go to my website after they booked.
Ah,
Yeah, yeah. It's my magazine. Yeah,
yeah.
it's very useful, and I have to have it. But there are very few clients who come to me and say, "I saw you on the website,
Yeah.
and I booked with you." It's very much, you've been recommended. Could you book me an appointment? And then the first time I see us, and say, "Oh, I didn't know you were a trainer." And I go, "Oh, no, I am." They've obviously been on the website. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's about knowing who you are, what your capabilities are, and what you want in life. Yeah, maybe if it had been 20 years ago, maybe I would want to be, one of the competitors who's, running training all around the country. But I love what I'm doing. I can manage my business. I'm within my capabilities, and of course, I can say no.
Okay. Well, on that note, I think that's a good final note. I do think like that's what life balance is, isn't it? When it comes down to it, am I doing what suits me? Am I doing what I love? And like, does that fulfill me?
Yeah.
And listening to that. Well, this has been lovely, Ian. Thank you so much. And we will put your website in the link. So
Good. Okay.
and any references to your articles as well. That would be brilliant. Well, thank you for your time today.
It's been a real pleasure. I've loved it. So yeah, and hopefully people will engage and watch it, and maybe we've answered a few questions for them. So it's been good.
Great. Lovely. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.